Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are getting under the hood of a true cycling phenomenon, Tadej Pogacar. We're going to deconstruct his physiology using some incredible data from a Dr. Peter Attia interview, along with sharp analysis from sources like the5krunner.com. Let's see what really makes this champion's engine run. So let's just start with a number that for most of us is kind of hard to wrap our heads around. 340 watts. I mean, think about it. For most cyclists, holding 340 watts is a serious, long-burning effort. For Tadej Pogacar, that's not a sprint. That's his Zone 2 power. A comfortable all-day pace he can just hold for hours. So the question is, what kind of biological engine actually makes that possible? Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to look at his heart, then his insane power output, then the science behind his recovery, and finally, how he mixes all that hard data with pure, old-fashioned intuition. First things first, before we dive into all the crazy numbers, we really have to be clear. We're talking about the absolute peak of human performance here. These aren't just good stats. They're the kind of numbers that make you rethink what's even possible. All right, let's talk about his heart metrics. And this is fascinating. This isn't some new tech obsession for him. Pogacar has been training with a heart rate monitor since he was just 12 years old. So he has this deep, almost second-nature understanding of his body's rhythms. First up, the most basic metric of all, resting heart rate. It's just a simple snapshot of your cardio fitness. And the rule is pretty simple. The lower, the better. And wow, this slide really shows the massive gap between an elite athlete and the rest of us. His typical nightly average is around 42 to 43 beats per minute. That's almost half of what you'd see in an average adult. Get this, even when he's sick or totally worn out, his heart is still calmer than most people's when they're just sitting on the couch. And to really put a point on it, his all-time recorded low is just 37 beats per minute. I mean, just think about that. It means his heart is so powerful and so efficient, it barely has to work to keep his body going when he's at rest. It's incredible. Now, let's look at the other end of the scale, his max heart rate. As a junior, he could hit a mind-blowing 213 beats per minute. Now, that's come down a little bit to 203, but that is still a full 10 beats higher than what the standard formula would predict for his age. This huge range between his lowest low and his highest high, it basically gives him this massive physiological playground to work in. All right, now for the stuff that just redefines endurance, his power numbers. This is the actual force he's putting through the pedals, not for a minute, but for hour after hour. So let's go back to that Zone 2 power we talked about. This table, which draws on some great analysis from places like the5krunner.com, shows his crazy adaptation. When he's fresh, his heart is ticking along at 150 to 155 beats per minute to churn out that 320 to 340 watts. But here's the wild part. When he's fatigued, his system gets more efficient. His heart rate actually drops, but he's still putting out the exact same power. That is the true sign of a world-class aerobic engine. And hey, it's not just us who are blown away. As Dr. Peter Attia said, being able to sustain that kind of power with such a low physiological cost, well, that's what really separates a champion like him from even other top pros. But hey, races aren't won on flat roads, right? What about the climbs? Well, for that, we look at a metric called VAM. It's basically a pure number for how fast you can ride straight up a mountain. So, to put his climbing into perspective, Pogacar can hit a VAM of 1,700, sometimes 1,800. Peter Attia, who's a really fit guy himself, said he's happy if he can hit 1,000. This isn't just about going up a hill fast, It's a weapon. He can climb at a pace that puts all his rivals deep into the red zone, a place they can't recover from, while he's still relatively comfortable. Look. Putting out huge power for one day is one thing, but doing it again and again, day after day, that's how you win a 3-week Grand Tour. And that's where the science of recovery and a metric called heart rate variability comes in. To put it really simply, HRV gives you a snapshot of your body's readiness. Is it ready to perform? A higher number means your nervous system is chilled out, you're recovered, and you're ready to go. Now, what's really interesting here is the range, but more importantly, the consistency. Sure, on a bad day, his HRV might tank down to 35. On a great day, it's way up at 150. But look at that middle number. During a brutal 3-week race like the Tour de France, his HRV stays incredibly steady, day in and day out, between 80 and 110. That shows an unbelievable ability to just absorb stress and bounce right back. But all this data can be a double-edged sword. Pogacar himself admits that seeing a low HRV number can mess with your head. He told this great story about how his girlfriend would check his numbers for him, but she'd only tell him what they were after the race was over, just so a bad number wouldn't get in his head.
So, we have all this amazing data, but how does he actually use it when he's out on the road in the heat of a race? Well, this is where the art of being a champion meets the science of performance.
You see, Pogacar is the perfect example of someone who lives in both worlds. On one side, you have the hard data, power meters, lactate tests, HRV. But on the other, you have the feel, that deep, intuitive sense of his own body that he's been developing since he was 12. He trusts his own perceived effort. He even said that sometimes power meters can be unreliable, and he prefers to check their numbers against his speed on roads he knows and, most importantly, how his heart feels. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Pogacar's whole approach gives us a blueprint. It's about tracking the work you're doing for sure, your power, your VAM, but it's just as much about listening to the internal cost on your body, your heart rate, your HRV. And maybe the biggest lesson is to use data as a guide, not a dictator. You have to trust the signals your own body has learned to send you over years and years of training. Which kind of leaves us with one last big question to chew on. Is an athlete like Pogacar just born with an incredible genetic engine? Or is he built, piece by piece, through the meticulous use of science and data? You know, the more you look at him, the more you realize the truth is, you probably can't have one without the other.